What happens when your old life no longer fits? I think one of the strangest experiences is when everything looks okay on the outside. You might have the relationship, the job, the home, the routines, the friendships, and yet there's this quiet feeling underneath it all that something isn't fully right anymore. It doesn't have to be dramatic, not catastrophic. It's just a knowing. It's just that feeling that you've somehow drifted away from yourself. And I think for a long time, I ignored that feeling because my life looked objectively really good. I was married, I had my daughter, I had my work, I had lovely people around me. There wasn't some huge explosive reason to leave my old life, but internally I felt disconnected from myself. And I think so many people stay in that place for years. I think because they're waiting for a good enough reason to change, or they tell themselves other people would be grateful for this. I certainly said that to myself many times. Nothing is actually wrong. I should just be happy. But we can't will ourselves into feeling something that we don't. Your body knows. And eventually mine became impossible to ignore. So around 2.5 years ago, I made the decision to leave my marriage. And honestly, at the time, I thought that what I was searching for was a different external life, maybe a more aligned relationship, more freedom, more happiness, more excitement. And some of that did happen, for sure. But what I didn't realise was that the real work had absolutely nothing to do with changing my circumstances. It had everything to do with the relationship I had with myself. Because when you leave a relationship, or you leave a job that's not serving you, or you leave a friendship or whatever, you take your nervous system with you. You take your patterns, your fears, your coping mechanisms, your need for validation, all of it you take with you. I brought all of that stuff with me. And I think that's the moment that a lot of people hit in transition. The moment where you realise, oh, it's not just my life that has to change. It's not just this job or this relationship or this friendship. It's me. And that's where it's like a really pinnacle moment, because it's where things for me became both infinitely harder and infinitely more beautiful. Because healing for me hasn't looked like becoming perfect or endlessly positive or fixed. It's looked like learning how to actually stay with myself. It's looked like learning how to sit in discomfort without immediately escaping it. It's looked like learning how to stop outsourcing my sense of safety, learning how to be alone without feeling abandoned, and learning how to listen to my body. And I'll never forget when my husband and I were having our conversations near the end, where we both knew something wasn't right for us. We both knew the relationship was not working, the dynamic was not working, but we were really struggling to let go, mainly because of our daughter, which makes perfect sense. And I just recall one of the last conversations we had in classic people pleaser form. And I'll do a whole separate episode on people pleasing because that definitely requires, okay, we'll try one more time. And the moment I said those words out loud, literally the moment I said it out loud, I felt immediately nauseous. I felt immediately sick. My body knew that wasn't what I wanted. I was done. I was trying to override my truth, and my body was letting me know. For me, that was one of the moments where I really knew this was the right path, because I could hear myself again. The body and the mind were in some way, they felt like I could just, the channel was open. I could just hear myself again. I'd spent such a long time not being able to hear myself, like so many of us do. I'd spent years listening to other people and looking outside of myself for answers. But the truth is, the answers, they're always within us, always, no exceptions. We know our own truth. We have an innate knowing and gnosis. We know what we truly want. You are the expert in your life. And I spent such a long time not believing. I did not believe that. I thought everyone else knew stuff and I didn't. Whether that be friends, whether it be experts, people in authority, whatever. That any person that's worth their salt will tell you that they are not the guru. Anyone that you work with, the answers are within you. It's just sometimes about helping you hear yourself again. And I had so much help with that. I had therapy, I had coaching, I had support from amazing friends, I had treatments for my body. All of it helped me reconnect with myself. And I think that's where a lot of us get lost, particularly in romantic relationships. These relationships, romantic relationships, can be where our deepest wounds are triggered, but also where some of our deepest healing happens too. For me, I think my whole life has really been about trying to reconnect with the body. My day job is working with the body, so I always knew how much wisdom it holds. I could do that with other people, I could connect, but I'd got to a stage where I genuinely couldn't hear myself anymore. The combination of body work, therapy, coaching, all of it just helped me slow everything down. It gave me space. And it's in that space that you start to hear yourself again. It's in that space that your truth becomes clearer. And sometimes that truth isn't pretty. I didn't want my truth to be that I no longer wanted to be in that marriage. Objectively, we had everything we're taught to want. We had the mortgage, we had the beautiful daughter, we had friends, we had a life that we built together. I didn't want the truth to be that I didn't want to be in that marriage anymore, because I knew it was going to begin a journey of upheaval for our daughter, for us, complications, logistics, emotions, feeling. I knew it was going to cause all of that. So I didn't want that to be the truth. But when we argue with ourselves, that's wherein the suffering lies. It was the truth. Ultimately, it has worked out better for everyone, and that was the bit that my brain at the time couldn't quite process. But yes, it has worked out better for everyone, but I struggled to see that at the time. But when we slow down, that is when our truths come to the surface. And I think when you're used to moving at a million miles an hour like we did in society, we constantly distract ourselves with noise, people, validation, busyness, relationships, scrolling, achievement. I invite you to put a pause on that. I invite you to take some time where you do start to hear yourself again. Because honestly, at first it can feel uncomfortable, sometimes a bit devastating. I don't want to sugarcoat anything here. I want it to be really real. And I remember when I first started journaling, I'd not really done it before. And when I first started journaling, I began noticing and observing the thoughts that were constantly running through my head. And I'm not going to lie, some of the ways in which I spoke to myself weren't nice. And seeing that clearly for the first time was actually really confronting, because we make our decisions based on who we believe we are. We build our lives around what we think we deserve. So when you begin witnessing the internal conversation you've been having with yourself for years, often your entire life, it can feel really jarring. You realize just how long you've ignored yourself. So no, I'm not going to pretend that the healing journey is easy. Sometimes it's really tough. But eventually, if you stay with yourself and you stay with the work, something softer starts to emerge. That conversation with yourself starts to feel, more gentle. A sense of stillness, a feeling of safety within yourself, a sense that maybe nothing outside of you actually needs to change for you to feel whole. And if someone had said that to me a few years ago, I genuinely wouldn't have understood it. I wouldn't have been able to comprehend that nothing outside of us needs to change in order for us to feel differently. But that has been my experience. I ended up being in this little studio, and I'd have evenings where I didn't have anything to do, and I dove into podcasts, and some of the messages just wouldn't land. I could sense there was a truth, like there was a resonance with me. I could sense it, but some of them I just couldn't understand. And I understand them all now. I understand every single message that I heard at that time when things felt so difficult. And the truth is, if you turn that attention that you've been facing outwards for your whole life, if you start to turn that inward, yes, it's uncomfortable at first, but if you persist with that focus on yourself and you change some of those conversations, your outward changes inevitably anyway. Because when you truly start to connect with yourself, anything that isn't aligned with you and what you want just naturally falls away. If you're in a relationship and you're umming and ahhing about whether or not you want to stay in it, if you just focus on you and listening and hearing and connecting, your answer will just show itself to you. And none of this means that I don't still struggle with things now. Of course I do. I'm a human. I'm still growing. I'm still learning. I'm still navigating changes and relationships and fears and uncertainty, all of that human stuff, of course. But the difference is I no longer feel disconnected from myself in a way that I once did. And I think that's what home within means to me now. Not perfection, not having life figured out, not always feeling calm, but that knowing that wherever life takes me, I can come back to myself. And that's really what I want this podcast to explore. Not self-improvement, because there's nothing wrong with any of us. Not becoming a different person, because there's nothing wrong with who we are. But it's just about becoming more honest and more connected with ourselves, because then some of the behaviors maybe that we don't really like, maybe some of the patterns that we'd prefer to change, they will naturally fall away. When you become more connected, more present, more with you, you start making choices that feel completely aligned with who you are. So if you're in a season where your old life no longer fits, my hope is that this podcast feels like a place where you can just breathe a little bit and maybe begin listening to yourself again. Thank you so much for being with me today. I will see you next time.